Morning sunlight filtered through the glass atrium of Meridian Air's new terminal in Denver. Passengers trickled onto Flight 707, bound for the East Coast. Among them was Eli Mercer, a low-profile but highly influential figure in the aviation industry, one of the minds behind Meridian's rise to global prominence. But today, Eli wasn't here in an executive role. He was flying under the radar, just a man with a ticket in hand and a purpose to fulfill. He reached his assigned seat, 2A in first class, only to find it occupied. A woman lounged across the seat and the one beside it, wrapped in a monogrammed shawl, earbuds in, clearly uninterested in her surroundings. "This is my spot," Eli said evenly, showing his ticket. The woman, who would later be identified as Deirdre Langston, a socialite known more for her connections than her charm, glanced at him without removing her sunglasses. "I already claimed this. I need the space," she said flatly. "Check again." "I have seat 2A, Eli repeated. "You're in the wrong place." Deirdre smirked, adjusted her shawl, and didn't budge. The cabin grew quiet. Conversations tapered off. A few smartphones tilted upward in anticipation. The attendant, Nia, young but composed, stepped in, glancing between the boarding passes and their holders. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your ticket," she said gently. "I told you," Deirdre snapped. "I need 2 seats for medical reasons. He can find another one. I'm sure he'll manage." Her tone wasn't just dismissive. It was confrontational, daring anyone to object. Eli didn't argue. He simply stood still, a model of restraint. The flight's purser, Dennis Roth, approached. He'd seen similar scenes before, but this one felt different. "Let's get this sorted quietly," he said to both. "I want to speak to your supervisor," Deirdre declared. "You're looking at him," Dennis replied. "But I'll check the manifest again to be sure." The hush deepened. More phones came out. The moment had gone live, whether the airline liked it or not. "She doesn't know who that is, does she?" a teenager whispered to his dad a row back. Deirdre, oblivious or uncaring, pulled her blanket tighter. From the front of the cabin, another attendant, Raphael, whispered to Nia. "This guy built the company. She's arguing with a ghostwriter of the rulebook. We can't force her off," Nia murmured back. "But this will blow up if we cave." "She's already gone viral," Raphael muttered. "I saw 3 people filming." Deirdre crossed her legs dramatically. "If he touches me, you'll all have a lawsuit on your hands. I feel unsafe." An audible gasp rippled down the row. Eli's jaw clenched slightly. Still, he said nothing. A woman in business wear leaned toward her companion and whispered, "He's not saying a word." That's power. As the crew huddled, trying to figure out how to defuse the standoff, more passengers weighed in. Some quietly, others more bold. "Why should one person delay the whole flight?" muttered a man in a gray sweater. "Because she thinks she can," came the reply from across the aisle. Finally, Nia returned, this time with a different tone. She had received a directive from corporate. "Ms. Langston," she said with clear authority, "you must take your assigned seat. Mr. Mercer has priority for 2A. Deirdre tensed. "This is bias. You'll all be sorry. I'll make calls." "You're free to do that, ma'am," Nia said, "but not from this seat." Still seated, Eli finally broke his silence. "No one here is trying to embarrass you, but we all have rules to follow. You're just another man in a nice suit," Deirdre hissed. "Thinking money makes you important." "No," Eli said quietly. "Doing the right thing does." Behind him, a round of soft clapping began, spreading slowly. The situation escalated again when Deirdre stood up and turned to the cabin. "Is this what you call progress?" Ganging up on one woman. A retired teacher in row 4 shook her head. "It's not about gender, dear. It's about decency." Another woman, black and sharply dressed in a navy pantsuit, spoke louder. "People like me don't always get asked nicely to move. But today I say, no more." Deirdre tried one last tactic. "Then I want off this flight. You can't keep me here." Dennis stepped in, flanked now by security staff. "You're not being detained," he said calmly. "But you can't leave until the issue is resolved." For safety, realizing she'd lost control, Deirdre began to shout at the cameras. "You're all going to regret this." Eli, still seated, looked at her and said just loud enough, Everything you're saying is on record. So think carefully. Silence followed. Then, the voice of the captain cut through the quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, we will depart once all passengers are seated correctly. Thank you for your understanding. That was it. The crew stood united. The passengers understood. Deirdre, finally realizing she was alone in her performance, slumped into her seat, this time the one on her ticket. The plane began its taxi. During the flight, Eli didn't gloat. He read a book, answered a few work messages, and kept to himself. But online, the moment was already viral. The hashtags trended. Hashtag respect in the air, hashtag Eli Mercer moment, hashtag seat matters. Even the company issued a quiet press release affirming its commitment to equal dignity for all travelers. And somewhere, weeks later, a young woman boarded a different Meridian flight. When a man questioned her right to her first-class seat, the crew didn't hesitate. They handled it swiftly, respectfully, and publicly. The bar had been raised, not through yelling, not through money, but by one person choosing calm over chaos and inspiring an entire company to follow his lead. As Flight 707 touched down on the East Coast, a quiet transformation had already taken place, not just in the air, but in the hearts of those who witnessed what happened. Eli Mercer didn't stride off the plane seeking cameras or applause. He walked through the terminal like anyone else. No entourage, no spotlight, no PR spin. But something had shifted, not just for him, but for the people who had watched him do something rare in a world addicted to noise, stand his ground without raising his voice. That's the thing about true leadership. It doesn't come from titles or from shouting the loudest. It comes from choosing integrity when no one demands it, from knowing you have the power to make a scene and deciding instead to make a point. By the time Eli left the airport, his name had already begun trending online. But he didn't stop to read the headlines. He knew this wasn't really about him. This was about something much larger. The idea that respect isn't a luxury. It's a baseline. The ripple effect was immediate. The airline quietly reviewed its internal culture. New training was implemented. Not just a PowerPoint presentation, but real conversations about entitlement quiet bias and how to protect the dignity of every traveler, not just the ones who shout the loudest. And while some dismissed the story as another viral moment, others understood its weight. Because this wasn't just a story about a seat. It was a story about how easily we let small injustices slide until someone, anyone, finally says, no more. The passengers on that plane would remember what they saw. Not the conflict, but the resolve, the stillness. The way Eli never had to demand respect. He carried it with him. And Deirdre Langston, her fallout was swift, but not because Eli punished her. Because the public did what the moment demanded. It watched, it judged, and it made a choice. People had grown tired of excuses wrapped in privilege, of watching the loudest person take what didn't belong to them while others sat back, hoping not to get involved. This time, someone did get involved. Not by yelling, not by threatening, but by refusing to step aside. Weeks later, something else began to change. Other passengers, strangers, students, parents, retirees, started sharing their own stories. Times they were asked to move, to be quiet, to be smaller, to make room, and how from now on they wouldn't. Eli never posted about the incident. He didn't need to. His silence had already said more than 1,000 posts could. Instead, he got back to work, quietly funding new policies to ensure passenger dignity, backing training initiatives, and launching an anonymous reporting system that actually meant something. And yet, the real win wasn't in the policy changes or media coverage. It was in what came after. On a flight out of Chicago, a young man in a hoodie was told by an older passenger he should probably switch seats to make things easier. The flight crew responded instantly. He's exactly where he belongs. On another route, a mother with a toddler was asked to move by a businessman who needed the space to work. The answer came with no hesitation. Her child isn't the inconvenience here. Every time, the crew cited the new dignity guidelines. Every time, the decision was backed, not just by policy, but by passengers who now understood what was at stake. And that's how culture changes. Not all at once, but seat by seat, voice by voice, moment by moment. Sometimes it takes a headline to remind us of the line we shouldn't cross. But sometimes it just takes one person choosing not to step aside. Eli Mercer never asked to be the face of a movement. He just wanted the seat he paid for. But what he reclaimed wasn't just a chair in row 2. It was the idea that in a shared space, whether a plane, a boardroom, or a society, everyone matters equally. And that dignity, once defended, flies further than any jet ever could.